Welcome to the Health Unboxed podcast. That's what we call the Health Unboxed, where we basically talk about all things health from a multi-dimensional perspective. And obviously, we've got Kev on today. We're going to be talking about breath work mainly, but with a little bit of cold therapy on the side, which is a very fascinating topic. So first, I'll just get you to just give me an introduction to you yourself, what you do, and maybe how you got into it.
Sure. Thanks for having me here, by the way, Dom. I appreciate this. It's amazing, this setup. I love it here. It's great. So I started Breatheolution in 2020, and the reason I used the name Breatheolution really was because I read James Nestor's book, and it's like he referred to it as sort of I think I can't even remember how he worded it now, but the discovery of a lost art. It was like something that we're kind of forgetting how to do. So I thought the evolution and breathe, and I just put Breatheolution together.
It's a great name, to be fair.
Breatheolution, yeah.
I'm surprised no one's come up with it prior to it, to be fair.
Sure. People call it Breatheolution, but it's Breatheolution, so it sounds a bit more like evolution. Yeah. I literally started that on the back of taking people into Coombs Reservoir, and that's what I was doing at the beginning, and I was still doing my normal job at the time. But after sort of years of addiction, no doubt I may even talk about a little bit about that, but years of addiction and stuff, and I found I kind of became addicted to the cold and the breath work as I was doing at the time, and breathing exercises, because I was getting dopamine from it, although I didn't know that at the time. So I started to take people into the cold. The first time I went in, I started to sort of puffing and panting, that sort of thing, which we spoke about before. And I was quite intrigued as to why that happened like that. So I started to sort of read up on why the human body reacted like that. And then I started to change the way that I breathe in through my nose, out through my mouth, making it a bit longer. And then before I knew it, people, I was going in with other people, and they were saying, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? And then I'm guiding people in. And they found the ssort of breathing techniques and my guidance to be quite helpful. They were getting used to it themselves and stuff. So it just kind of took off from that, really.
I mean, I think it takes some awareness because most people, as we spoke about a minute ago, will go into the cold and they're not thinking, it sounds like you're already creating this awareness around like, wow, like why am I reacting like this? Whereas most people just go in and flipping shit themselves and jump out and never want to do it again because it's quite a shock, isn't it? So why do you think, were you already kind of like a little bit more aware, or was this kind of like the first step into that, just becoming more aware of your body and how it was responding?
Yeah, it's a good point, that, Dom, really. Yeah, because prior to that, really, I was so disconnected from my own body. I think I spoke to you that when you come and did a session with me and Mrs. like, and being an addict for so long, I kind of lost connection with my mind to my body, and sensation was just more like kind of excitement and buzz, as opposed to what's actually going on. What is that? What's happening to me? And when I got in, I was just intrigued as to what really made me sort of hyperventilate. That was the thing, why my breath was taken away, and afterwards I felt fantastic afterwards, because obviously I got this hit of adrenaline and dopamine, and I felt amazing all day. I thought, I'm going to give that another go, but of course each time you get in, it's fashionably reliable because it's always cold.
You know what to expect.
But you know what to expect, and it does get easier, obviously.
Yeah, of course it does,
the more and more you get in. Some days it's harder than others, depends on what sort of a day you've had, But yeah, I've been in the cold near enough every day since, almost, to be honest, unless I've been poorly, which has been rare.
So, like, in terms of when did you first start doing this then?
2020.
Oh wow, so you're talking three years ago, yeah?
Yeah, there or thereabouts. Yeah. Sort of doing this as my living now. This is what I'm a breath coach and cold water therapist for a living. Certainly the first sort of 6 to 8 months, I was just doing it for fun and guiding people in, and there was like an honesty box next to on the side of the reservoir, and people just put a few quid in it or whatever.
I love that. So it's almost like a volunteer kind of thing, really, isn't it?
Sure, yeah. I was getting a lot from it. It was kind of arousing my ego a little bit as well, because people saying, "Oh, this is amazing! It's really working." And so I was enjoying it. I was enjoying what everybody else was getting from it as well, and it was helping them. And it was, and some of the people that I was talking to at the time were coming off medication. Although I wasn't telling them, obviously, I'm not a doctor, but they felt so much better that they were coming off mental health medication.
Yeah.
Some of them were messaging me saying, Kev, I've come off me antidepressants. I've put them on the shelf. I was like, wow, crikey, really?
It's so hard to. It's such a hard thing. Is that specifically to the water or the breath, or was it a combination of both in terms of like the medications?
I think it was a combination of the two, really. But I think the cold, because it had this ability to allow the body to produce natural feel-good chemicals and slow release ones at that. And not only that, the camaraderie as well, I think it was at the time of
with people and
the getting together and just like-minded people, the chats, the laughs that were going on at the side of the water. There's people coming from all over town. They were coming from all over the place. At one point there's like 30 odd
flipping out
people.
See, and it's almost like you said to us when we did it with you the other week. It's almost a little bit easier to do while you've got a big group of you there and you've got that support to get in. When you do it on your own, which we'll talk about, it's a different ball game, isn't it? Trying to do that on your own.
Sure. Because I think the times that we struggle the most, Dom, and you'll know this. Obviously, everybody feels the same way. The times that we struggle the most is on our own.
100%.
And we use other people to co-regulate with, either our wives, our partners, our spouses, our loved ones, our pets, our friends. But when the proverbial hits the fan, it's us, and you're on your own. So if you can manage to get into the cold on your own, it builds a different level of resilience.
Yeah.
This is obviously what Wim Hof found when he was sort of jumping off rocks into a river in pitch black in the middle of the night. He knew the water was there, but just a leap of faith in the dark. What does that do to the animal? What does it do to the nervous system of that animal? It's like strong.
I guess you come back stronger, don't you?
Yes, this is it.
That's definitely what I've got from doing the cold. Is it's really difficult to explain to people who haven't done it or haven't quite experienced it. But it is just a better regulated nervous system. Really, that's what it kind of just. You just feel less affected by day-to-day things. That's what I've got from it. And like there has to be a reason. Like when I started doing it, it was just like I did it once, and then I think I did it for about 100 days back to back. I was just like, I don't know why. I just was like, I feel that good doing it. I can't explain why I feel that good. I just do.
Sure.
But trying to tell people that is quite a hard thing to put across to someone who just sees it as pain and discomfort and awful. And that's kind of what most people have. Like, so you must hear all the people, like you said to us before, you get people who book in with you and then they'll kind of go, do you know what, Kev, I don't fancy it today. When they look outside and see a bit of clouds or whatever, you must come up against these kind of mind blocks, these obstacles, these kind of barriers that people put in front of themselves all the time.
Sure, 100%, mate. Yeah, that happens, quite a lot. Because, we know that when the sun's out and we're feeling good and we're happy, we feel safe and we're not vulnerable. We're far more like, I'm going to go and book and I'm going to get adventurous, I'm curious, I'm going to do this. And then obviously on the morning, it's raining hard, it's gloomy outside and, I'm not feeling so good today, mate, or, I'm going to call it a day and just sort of bottle it. And this is what the brain does, whereas it's exactly the same. But because of how the body keeps the score, how it remembers, how the nervous system remembers, your external environment and what's going on around you, it completely changes and switches how your mind works and how you try and get back to safety. So it'll start to feed you sort of a false information, really, about to get you back to safety. It doesn't want you to be vulnerable
or in pain.
In pain.
That's all it wants to do, is save you from pain, feeling unsafe and all this, and it will do anything to try and, that's what I always say to people, it will do anything to try and just keep you comfortable and out of danger, really, isn't it?
Sure, and it's the same in your game. And people say, you know, just getting to the gym is half the battle. And getting there and getting your trainers on and standing outside your front door for a run or whatever it is that you're doing, it's actually getting there because of all the noise of your nervous system trying to keep you in bed, or have a warm shower instead, or have a nice cup of tea and some toast and sit on the sofa.
I think I always say to people, we've all got those conversations, but I think a lot of people think that they're on their own in that they have, you know, they have these conversations where it says, oh, don't go in the cold, don't go and train, don't go and do this and that. But they think they're on their own.
No.
But everyone has it. I believe everyone's got that, but it's whether you decide to let that rule your decision making, yeah?
Absolutely, 100%, mate, yeah. And I say this to everybody, and you can't avoid it. It's just part of being human. And this system of trying to, of constant sort of, you know, safety to vulnerability all the time is constantly fluctuating in what we eat, our hormones, how we're feeling, our experiences, our consciousness. So there's just so many factors that are going into that. And yeah, everybody feels, I still feel it every day. You know, sometimes when I go in the cold, I'm just not in it. And my mind is doing the same things. Oh, you did it yesterday, or, you know, you've already been in today, you know, maybe just go and get some food from Tesco's. I'm like, I see you. I know what you're doing. Thank you, but not today. Thank you.
Those are genuinely the conversations you have to have. And it's like you're having a conversation with just a strange part of you, like a different person.
Sure.
In it. I love it. I literally laugh at it because I'm just like, I know exactly that. I know what you're doing. I'm not giving in. I'm still getting in every time. Absolutely.
And this is when, you know, people that, you know, these big famous people, like Mike Tyson, I think we spoke about him, but, you know, making the uncomfortable comfortable.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Which is very, very, very difficult to do. But, you know, just those last, like in your game, in you know, in exercising, those last 4 or 5 reps, when the brain is telling you, oh, you're done, it's painful, it's hurting, you've probably got another 10 or 15, 20 reps in there. But, you know, and this is what separates the people who are successful from the ones who don't sort of quite make it, because they're allowing the brain to tell them that it's better to be safe. So, you know, whether this is going on riding a horse or getting on a motorcycle or doing a bungee jump or whatever it is, use the cold as an external environment, so-called threatening environment to your body. Use that environment to build physical and mental resilience in you as an animal, and you carry it around. You carry it to the supermarkets, the lifts, the uncomfortable places that you sit in where you normally get anxious, to school, to college, to university, wherever, to job interviews. You take it with you. And like you mentioned before, then as you were saying that the 100 days back to back, you started to sort of feel a little bit different. You know, you could feel that sort of slow release dopamine, and it felt good. At the time, not so good, because you've got to be uncomfortable. But eventually, it starts to get a little bit more comfortable each time. So what's happening there? That's physical adaptation again in the body. You know, just the same as, you know, lifting a heavy weight, you know, you're lifting whatever it is, it starts to feel a bit more comfortable. Yeah. At first, it's like, oh, God, that was awful. But, you know, the more you keep going at it, the easier it gets.
100%. Yeah, I've noticed that definitely. It gets easier. But in the circumstances that it gets easier, should you, because of the adaptation that's occurring, do you make it harder for yourself? Do you know what I mean? Is that the thing to do? So, like, for example, if it's 5 degrees, like it was the other day when we did it, and I do 5 minutes, and then I do 5 minutes every day, and then by 2 weeks in, I'm actually like, God, this is it. Do I go for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes? Is that or is 5 minutes still enough?
Sure. and this is the age-old question: where do we stop? And the thing is, as animals, we're not really designed to. You've only got to look at people like, in your industry, sort of, and weightlifting and bodybuilding, this sort of thing. You look at people like Ronnie Coleman and these people that have been crippled by trying to be the absolute biggest and best at what they do. pushing themselves and getting into colder and colder temperatures. We have to be careful that we're not sort of introducing like performance kind of anxiety.
No.
But
because there's a time, there's a kind of point of diminishing returns where after a certain amount of time, it's just not really going to give you much value back.
Sure.
You know, is that the case? Or
I think so. Yeah, I think, you know, knowing your body well enough to know that scientifically you're doing good things for your body. Okay, your vascular system is improving, your immune response is improving, your skin is improving, your sleep is getting better, and all those will sort of stay the same. So, all right, there are benefits to pushing yourself a little bit harder and maybe just doing things a little bit differently. Not necessarily changing the weight, but just changing how you lift the weight.
Yeah.
Which you know about, or getting into a river one day during the day and then getting into the same river, the same temperature, but at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Totally different ball game, I guess. Isn't it?
Different ball game. Yeah. You're on your own. It's in the dark, and for safety reasons, you know, I'm not telling people to go out at 3 o'clock. Disclaimer at this point. Yeah, at this point, don't go out on your own. Get into the cold. Do it. You know, you're better off with somebody else around. You know, for your own safety. But I've done that. You know, I've gone out in the night and got into the cold to see how it feels like, and you feel different.
I bet you do.
You feel more vulnerable because the environment's changed, and it feels more threatening on the animal. You know, who's about, what's about.
I like the way you put that, because is what you're saying, that cold is literally just a means to. It's just it could be other. You could use other means. It's just one means to put you in a stressful environment where your body learns to control the stress response in that. So the darkness, being alone, that just adds to the stress. So I guess that would just increase the challenge.
Sure.
And increase your resilience.
That's it. Yeah. Right, we can go now.
We've done it. Covered all bases.
Yeah, that's it. Cancel everything. 100%. Exactly that.
It. Yeah, I've never even thought about that. I've just thought cold is the thing. It's just cold. But
sure.
I guess it's just one tool that you found really works.
Sure, and obviously it comes in all varying forms. It comes in a red wheelie bin. It comes in a cold shower. It comes in a waterfall. It comes in a lake, a reservoir, a bath. You know, a cryo chamber, a flotation tank. It doesn't matter where it comes. Just keep switching it.
Yeah.
And giving your body the opportunity to build resilience in as many forms as possible. Then your nervous system's going to be a little bit more prepared in lots of situations.
Yeah.
So if you're practicing breathing exercises, practice breathing exercises in situations where you normally feel vulnerable. So if you feel vulnerable going into a supermarket or being on a train or going into a lift or at heights, that's where you need to focus on your breathing.
Yeah.
Because it's normally in those situations where your nervous system's already frightened.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And it's the same with the cold. If you can change and switch the environment about, it changes how your body finds resilience because you're giving it something extra to do every time.
Yeah, because I guess if you were to do, like you say, the breath, and I know we're talking a lot about ice, and I know your things, you're big on the ice and the cold, but your breath largely, aren't you? So I want to talk a lot about breath, but I will finish off on I do want to carry on with the ice a little bit more.
Sure.
But I guess if you're doing all this breath work, but then when it comes to these stressful situations, if you're not able to control your nervous system in that, then that's really what you need to try and pull in, I guess, isn't it? In the situations where, because I guess it's all well and good to be able to do it in the cold, but then if you're not able to pull that in to day-to-day situations that would normally cause you stress,
sure,
then you still work to do, isn't there? Still quite a lot of work. You still need to find a way to get that to work in day-to-day situations, yeah?
Yeah. And to do that, obviously, you need to be using those tools in every day-to-day situations. So as we spoke about on the session that we did, the importance of breathing through the organ which is for breathing, which is the nose. So just by introducing that alone, it changes your biochemistry, it changes your biomechanics, starts to affect how your body reacts to carbon dioxide, which is attached to the amygdala and fear. And there's so many
So much to think about, but almost like
so many factors.
We are going to talk about it today because I'm fascinated. I don't care about anyone else, but for most people, they just need to learn. They just need to practice. They should just practice the.
Sure.
Don't need to necessarily know all the science stuff, do they? But it's nice to know because, as you said to us when we came to see you, like I came to see you and I was excited to do it, but actually, I was more blown away because I like to learn stuff, and it was very educational in terms of what you were telling us.
Yeah.
And then it's meant that me and the missus have been actually implementing the stuff because we understand a little bit of the background, and that was just a great part of the session that we had with you.
Sure.
You know, it was so much more valuable than just jumping in the cold and doing some Wim Hof breath and then saying see you later.
Absolutely.
You know, I might have felt good for a few hours after, but ultimately if I'm not able to implement it, it's pretty pointless. So I like that. I really did like that.
Yeah, good point, mate.
But I want to know, just for people who are watching, and I think this is, again, for people who are interested in the education,
yeah,
and I'm a big believer that, like, if you understand why something's working and how something's working, it will work better and you'll be more motivated to go and do it, as we just said.
100%.
So let's look at the cold first.
Yeah.
What is happening when you get into the cold? Like, what, on a physiological level, and an emotional level, and a psychological level, and a spiritual level? Let's go into this. Like, what is actually occurring when you get in there?
So there's loads of things occurring. You know, vasoconstriction, so you're getting constriction of your blood vessels, and then at certain points vasodilation as well, depending on how you're breathing, of course, as well. But 73% of the receptors on your body, the temperature sensors on the outside of your body, on your skin, 73% of them are cold receptors, because your body, obviously from an evolutionary perspective, your body's going to be, you know, far more likely to perish in the cold than in the heat. So as soon as you get into the cold, your blood starts to run away from your extremities to protect your core, your organs, your visceral organs. So you know your feet become hot and it feels as if it's burning sensations you get on your legs and your feet, and it can be quite achy as well because all that, you know, you're getting that blood vessel constriction from there as well. You'll go through a lot of physiological changes. Your body will try and mobilize you. You'll be on your breath. I think we sort of mimicked that before, where it takes your breath away, so you'll and you can't catch your breath.
What's going on there then? Why is your body reacting like that?
So your body obviously doesn't want you to be in the cold. No. You know, it wants the nervous system basically wants us to be safe all the time. It doesn't really want us to be unsafe. And one of the ways the body will mobilize the organism or the animal is to get you to hyperventilate, to get you on your heels to leave. But what it'll also do is it'll also give you a lot of information. But in terms of on your breath,
a lot of information like, get the fuck out of the bath, right? Get out right now.
Get out. It's cold. You're going to die. This is awful. You know, it's terrible. You need to get out. This is bad for the body. I've done enough. I think I've had enough. You know, you need to get out. And 99.9% of the time, this is safe to do, depending on how fit and how healthy you are, obviously. But your breath is definitely one of those things that will be key in staying in control in that situation. So if you want to help your the delivery of blood around your body, your circulation, then try and see if you can be in control of that breath. And that's certainly a way to build up resilience in the cold as well. Because if you're more in control of your breath and your nervous system, you're far more in control of your physiology as well, and you're far more connected to it. So there's loads of things going on in the body. All that blood that shrinks back, when you come out of the cold, that blood then starts to pour back into your blood vessels, but it kind of opens up blood vessels and capillaries that were once sort of closed off or that were not in use. So it starts to improve circulation in the body. And
Which is no bad thing, I guess, for a million of different reasons. It's no bad thing, is it? No,
I mean, literally 50,000 miles of arteries, veins, blood vessels and capillaries in one human body. Enough to go around the earth twice. Yeah. So the blood's got to get to every millimetre of those blood vessels, so that the more efficient that system is, that vascular system is, the better. So cold water improves the vascular system.
And so that's like transfer of everything, really, isn't it? Because the vascular system is transferring not just oxygen, but minerals, nutrients. So you begin to understand, I guess, how big this really is. It's not just about a bit of discomfort in an ice bath.
Sure.
It's affecting your health in quite a huge way on a physiological level as well as the psychological level. Because I think a lot of people get into it for the psychological reasons.
Sure.
Rather than the actual health benefits, although I know some people do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of like physiologically, what else you mentioned improved blood circulation. What other physiological benefits are there to doing cold exposure?
There's loads. I mean, if you Google what the benefits of cold, we spoke a little bit about muscle recovery, didn't we? And it's good for that. But not too soon after. I
was going to say, this is a big thing. I say to clients, you're not supposed to do it after, are you?
Not immediately after.
No.
There's a certain amount of time. I know Joe Rogan, I think on the Rogan podcast, he speaks about maybe an hour or so. Could even be longer.
Oh wow! I thought it was longer. I thought you had to leave it, because the typical thing you see people do is they train the legs, they go flipping, think they've done a big session, they jump in the ice bath.
Sure.
And it's kind of like, that's like the old, like the thing people have done for quite a while.
Sure.
Almost like the bro science kind of ice bath,
Sure, yeah.
But then you read about, actually, you shouldn't do it after training. So why should you not do it post training then?
I don't know the science behind that, Dom, to be honest. It's something to do with these, is it this, you probably know more about this than me, the slow twitch fibers and things. There's certain things that's going on in the muscle tissue that stunts growth.
Yeah.
Afterwards. So if you're a bodybuilder, you probably want to leave it a bit longer, allow your blood to just keep on pumping and supplying blood. You don't really want the blood being dragged away from the muscle.
No, I guess that must play a role. It's the first time I've really thought about it, but I guess that must play a role in muscle recovery.
Yeah, you want fluid atom, you want blood going into those muscles that you've torn.
Yeah.
Whilst you've been in the gym, you don't want nutrients and blood being dragged away from them. You want to stay there for a good while, and then afterwards, once all that repair's taken place, there may be inflammation, and
that's what I'd heard, is that when you train, you cause muscle damage. You then have the inflammation off the back of that, and inflammation is actually positive. It helps to recover the muscles.
It does.
Cold then reduces the inflammation, but if you do it too soon, the inflammation hasn't had time to do its work.
Yeah.
So then you reduce the inflammation, your muscle repair isn't as good.
Sure.
So that's, I guess, one way why it would not be beneficial. But I kind of thought, I tell clients if they're doing it, to do it later either really later on in the day after training, or just do it the next day on a rest day.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, Dom, really. Doing it on a rest day is good, because don't forget, the body's still recovering from the training, the rest day. And people who know that maybe don't train every day, but sometimes if you do a harder session, it's not always the next day, it's the day after that.
Yeah, of course it is, yeah.
So if you can go in, not the next day, the day after that, maybe the inflammation level might be sort of slightly less at that point, which is probably why you can feel it a little bit more, then get into the cold.
So So for someone who's thinking about doing cold therapy, because I know a lot of people, because it's almost a bit of a fad these days, like people are just kind of doing it because they see other people doing it. Like the guy I told you about a minute ago did 13 seconds, had to get out. Like, why should someone do it? Like, what do you say to someone who's kind of thinking about doing it? Like, why should they do it? Like,
why should you do it? Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, that, really, and especially when something's faddy. When I say it's not faddy, we've been getting into cold water for centuries. The thing is that now is that we're not cold enough, really, and that's causing problems with human beings, because we're just too hot. I think I explained it when you came over and did your session, that we're in a hot supermarket that's heated, big heating fans on it, and then we've got all our North Face gear on. It might be -8 outside, and our gloves on and stuff. Then we bring the shopping out, we're nice and warm, we get into a nice preheated cars. You can have cars now that switch on and they preheat for when these Teslas and stuff like that, they heat for when you get in them. And you get into a warm car, then you go home with your shopping, you go into a central heated house. So we're never really cold.
No.
And our ancestors were freezing. So our evolution and the evolution of mankind has kind of relied upon us being very cold as animals. So if we change that so much that we never feel all levels of temperature as an animal that's meant to feel temperatures, we start to change. Are we changing the human body epigenetically so that it can't really react very well to cold temperatures? Is this one of the reasons why people drown when they fall into cold water?
Yeah.
Because of the gasp reflex, because they're just not used to the cold. If the person was used to the cold,
It wouldn't happen.
they're far less likely to gasp. Okay, there's still going to be a gasp reflex, but if you're used to it, it's far less likely to happen. So my advice would be for parents, if you're concerned about your children drowning, falling into cold water or lakes, or if they're going to go in reservoirs and things like that, get them in the cold. Because if they're used to it, they're far less likely to gasp. And also, if you think you're going to fall into cold, if you slip or if you trip and you're going to fall into a decent height into cold water, just make sure that your lungs are full when you hit the water. Because generally what happens is that people fall into rivers and lakes with their lungs empty.
Is that so they're basically... Because then, you mean just because they're not breathing in?
They're not drowning.
So they're just jumping in, and then when they get in, they go... And then that's when the water will...
Fill the lungs, yeah. So if you fall into cold water, instantly the body wants to introduce the gasp reflex as soon as you hit the water. And that happens, and it's an involuntary thing that happens on the body. And you'll see people when they go into the cold, like your mate, that 30 seconds, I was in for 30 seconds.
13.
13. Oh, right, even less. Poor fella. But no names. Yeah. But the gasp reflex is quick. And if you slow down a video, you watch people go into the water, it's instant. You can't stop somebody from doing that sometimes.
No. Not if they're not conditioned for it.
If they're not conditioned for it. So if you fall into cold water and you're under the water, you're still gonna the gasp reflex will still happen enough for you to fill your lungs. 500. Once you've got 500 milliliters in your lungs, it's yeah. So if we can, I would imagine if you look at the statistics of how many young people in Iceland or cold
It'll
places,
be much less because they're cold adapted, I guess.
They're adapted to the cold. So by just getting into the cold, there's so many benefits of the cold: mental benefits, physical benefits, physiological benefits in the body.
Yeah.
But it could save your life if your body's used to all temperatures. And not just that, if I've personally noticed that with cold water training or cold exposure training, I sweat less during the summer and I sweat less during exercise. It's almost as if my natural body regulation in terms of temperature is better in every direction. Yeah.
I think it does have that effect, doesn't it? I think
sure.
I've read quite a lot on how negative it is on overall health if your body can't regulate its body temperature very well. And
sure,
the cold is one way to get you just adapted to your body's just more resilient. We've used that word a lot, but
sure,
just be able to regulate itself a lot easier. And that's a very healthy thing for the immune system, for the cardiovascular system, for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. And you only have to go into hospitals and see why people are poorly. But if you look at a large percentage of them, there's a lot of them are struggling with cardiovascular issues, vascular issues of the body, and they're not moving.
No.
We discussed movement the other day, didn't we? Movement, cold, breathing properly. They're just three massive things for health. And if we just did enough movement and we breathed properly and we allowed ourselves to get cold regularly and hot regularly, both ends of the spectrum, I think it's all ends of the spectrum with everything. I think learn how to be still, learn how to move fast and hard, but be able to go to each end of the ladder. The same with your breath. Learn how to breathe really slowly. Then go and have a look at Wim Hof and learn how to hyperventilate. Go to each end of the ladder and you'll be able to find the balance of that. And it's the same with everything. So, and it's the same with the cold, you know. It's not, I'm not saying that hot baths are not a good thing. I personally can't get in them now because they just feel so hot, even when they're not all that hot. So that must be something going on with my receptors. But it's nice to get into a hot jacuzzi. Of course it is. But don't forget to get cold.
Do the cold, yeah, because it's about the whole spectrum, like you say.
Use the spectrum, and I think, and it's the same with food as well. Don't keep eating the same things over and over again. Vary your diet so that your body can react to different nutrients and food that you're putting into it.
And experience that full spectrum of everything that you can possibly get from food.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, so when I did saunas, everyone must be different in terms of what they are, and I don't know whether this is a genetic thing or whatever, but I do a lot of saunas and I'll do a lot of cold, and I'm far more tolerant of the cold than I am the sauna.
Than the heat.
Like, I have people who just never use a sauna in their life and sit there for half an hour and just like, fine, and I'm there dying, panicking in the sauna. I guess that's to do with my body just not regulating heat as well as it does regulate cold. What's going on in that? I guess is it just individual genetics?
I don't know the answer to that, but thinking about it, I would say almost certainly the people that sit in saunas and find it very, very easy would probably find it very difficult in the cold.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking. They do. Well, like Katie, she can soldier through a sauna for twice as long as I can, but then the cold, obviously, she doesn't like the cold.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of that.
Has the animal got so used to the warmth and the heat, turn the heating up?
Yeah, because there's that as well, because she will be a bit like that. She'll be a bit like, she'll feel the cold in the house and she'll want the heating on, she'll want the fire on and all this. Sure. So I guess it is that, isn't it, really? Sure.
And I think I was a little bit like that as well. But I think some of that's kind of passed down, Mum will be like, cover up, these old wives' tales, cover up, you're going to catch your death of cold and you're going to catch the flu,
Yeah, that's a good question. Is it true that if you're cold, you're going to catch a... I didn't think that was true. No. Like, every time I hear that, I'm kind of thinking, how does that even work? Like, tell me, I'd love to know the science behind this, but everyone's like, put a coat on or you'll catch a cold. I'm thinking...
Yeah.
Is that real?
I think it's an old wives' tale that I think from years and years of, the cold doesn't give you a cold. The cold is a virus. It's something that's it's coughed and sneezed into. It's in the atmosphere. You touch things and you pick it up. It's not something, I don't think, that's in your body. And certainly you don't get it by getting cold.
No, that's what I've just always wondered about that. And every time someone says that, I'm kind of thinking, what the fuck are you talking about?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you go to places like Scandinavia and these women that are getting in the cold in their 80s and 90s, they've never got colds.
No.
They've never got sore throats or flu.
No.
I always had several colds all the way through the year. And I'd always have sore throats because of the way that I was breathing. But my immune system was always a little bit on the edge.
Yeah.
Because of how I was, how I was just going through my life. Over breathing, not drinking the right things. I was drinking too much alcohol. I was eating the wrong foods, not really exercising enough. So your immune system is going to be low. It's everything really that we shouldn't be as hunter-gatherers. Generally, that's what we are. I mean, we don't even have to do that anymore, do we? Everything's just available. Heat is available. Food is available at any level.
We're a bit soft, really.
Soft.
We're a bit soft.
That is it. Yeah.
That's just the only way you can put it is the way I always think of it. It's like, because every time you say to someone, like, oh, I'm gonna go do a cold bath, and they're just like, oh, why did you do that? Like, all this, like, it's like, I just think people are too soft these days.
Sure.
We've got everything so easy, everything so comfortable, like you say, just regulation of heat in your house, coats every time you're cold, and I think it just makes people a little bit soft. And that's really why I got into the cold, was because I was kind of thinking, I want to push myself out of that discomfort.
Yeah.
To again, it's resilience building, isn't it? But I'm going to push myself out of that discomfort, kind of trying to take it back to ancestral, like, times where you'd have to deal with that. You didn't have an option to flip and just turn the heating on or anything like that. Yeah. And I think that's the real benefit it's had for me, is kind of just building up that appreciation for everything, all the comforts we've got. You know, it's if it was all taken away from you like that,
who would survive?
Yeah.
And the thing is, sometimes it can be, the cold can become addictive because of dopamine. We spoke about that before, and it's a bit like the gym. If you don't train, I need to train. You get this feeling that you an urge to go and lift some weights, or to run, or to cycle. There's an urge to fulfill a gap. And sometimes it's a bit sort of almost like obsessive compulsive, that, and it can lead into addiction. And addiction is being addicted to anything, addicted to the gym, addicted to the running, addicted to cycling, alcohol, booze, pornography, whatever it is, drugs, and it all sort of stems from this, I think, from this dopaminergic system of trying to find safety, but also trying to find comfort.
Yeah.
Because generally, when we find comfort as animals, we can procreate and spread our genetics, which is generally where the brain kind of always wants us all the time. So we have to be careful, like you were talking about, how far do we push ourselves? You have to be careful that that we understand certain limits as well. But obviously, there's a lot of people out there at the moment that are doing the Wim Hof method. They're trying to out-breathe each other and out cold each other, and some of them are getting themselves becoming unstuck.
Yeah, of course.
And there's been quite a few cases of hypothermia across the world, of people trying to out dip each other. So you have to be careful. And anything under 20 degrees is cold water therapy. Or is cold water on the body. If it feels uncomfortable, and then eventually you sit in it long enough to make it feel relatively comfortable, you've done your work. And you only need, if you look at the work of Susanna Solberg, maybe I think it's about 15 minutes per week in cold water.
That's all you need.
That's all you need.
It's not much, is it? And that's not even one go, is it? You don't have to do 15 minutes together.
No, just you could do and whatever.
Yeah, it's not much to ask, really, is it?
It's not a lot to ask.
I used to say, what was that I used to say when I got in? I used to say 5 minutes of, like, pain, because it is painful.
Sure.
5 minutes of pain for, like, it was like a whole day of just bliss. I used to feel incredible after doing it.
Sure.
And it was well worth it, no matter how painful it was.
Yeah.
Well worth it every single time.
Sure.
Well, actually, you spoke just quickly on the water before we move on to the breath. You spoke about the dopamine release you get from going into the cold.
Sure.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit more about that. What is that?
So, the thing is with the cold, I don't know the exact science of it, but you're getting a slower, longer release of dopamine. Mm-hmm. So it's not like the quick fix dopamine you get by buying something or by eating food, or drinking alcohol or whatever. They wear off pretty quickly in the body. So scientifically, you're just getting a slower release of dopamine, feel-good chemical in the body, if you get into the cold, because your body doesn't just recover, 20 minutes after getting out of the cold. It's still trying to repair itself for hours afterwards. It's still going through changes in the body every time you get in the cold. So the benefits of that. So I suppose if you've been used to, if you're an addict and you've been used to, quick fix dopamine, which is why exercise is good for dopamine, because it's not a quick hit.
No.
You tend to find that people that want slower release of dopamine, they stay in the gym for much longer.
Mm.
And, I think if people have been addicts where they've used quick hits for addiction, like I said before, whether it's, drink, drugs, pornography, whatever it is that you're addicted to as a human, if you get into a mode of using slow release dopamine, it changes maybe how you look for dopamine, in what version of dopamine you're looking for. Yeah. I think that's what it did with me, because as an alcoholic, I was so used to getting a short hit of dopamine, and then, and I'd have to keep drinking constantly. Once I got into the cold, I was getting that long, slower release dopamine, and it massively helped, because even at times where I'd normally be looking for a drink, I wasn't.
No.
And that was game changing for me.
You help people. You've had a lot of people come to you who've recovered from addiction through doing the cold and doing breath as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I've taken people in. People that have had cancer, quite a few people, and they've got cancer or they've got colostomy bags, and people with limbs missing, and people that are blind, and I've taken in quite a lot of people.
Yeah.
Over the past,
makes every single person
years
feel good. Like even if it doesn't feel good at the time, anyone who does it feels good. I've never known anyone to just get out and go, like, I don't feel any different. It works every time in terms of...
It does.
It's reliable, isn't it? That's why I always think it's always reliable, and it's quick.
It is quick.
You don't have to wait for the effects to come in a couple of days' time, like a lot of other things,
Sure.
It's a quick hit of that dopamine, and and you were saying this when we came to see you, actually. We're like, all of us are addicts to dopamine. We're all chasing dopamine from anything we possibly can.
Sure.
Some people get it from food. Well, we all get it from food, but to different degrees, we get it from different things, don't we?
Sure.
And
how much of it
you get, and in what form that secretion comes, is I guess where you've got to, whether you decide it's a beneficial way to get your dopamine hit or not. But the bottom line is, if you didn't get a dopamine hit, you'd be pretty depressed, because dopamine is what allows you to feel good in so many ways. Yeah. So I just think cold for me, you almost have to feel it to believe it. It's one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah, try it, but just take it steady. Nobody's asking anybody to get into an ice tank.
No.
Just get in a cold shower, just maybe 30 seconds, a minute. After you've had a warm shower, just turn it down. Just turn it down a little bit per day.
Yeah.
You don't have to do all the, all this sort of thing. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be that uncomfortable.
No.
Just you've got regulators now to help you just gently feed yourself into it. And the more you do it, the more comfortable it gets. But just watch your body. Don't allow your body. Remember, I was saying to you, if you do anything like this, exactly fight or flight.
Because the first thing you want to do, isn't it?
As soon as you go in the shower, your hands come up here to protect your organs almost, and your shoulders are up. You on your breath. Don't make sure that your hands are open. You dominate the environment. Which is difficult to do.
Of course it is, yeah. At first, definitely at first.
At first it is, yeah. I read something the other day about how boiling water makes the eggs hard, but it also makes potatoes soft.
Yeah.
So it's, in other words, don't let the environment dominate.
No.
What's in the water.
It's all about how you respond. It's your choice to respond.
Sure.
Although it doesn't feel like a choice for a lot of people.
Sure.
Because it's very involuntary, like you say. Those reactions feel very involuntary, but it's the adaptation. You do it, you get better at doing it. Yeah.
Sure.
And that's where
dictate your environment as opposed to the environment dictating you, allowing yourself to, it's not pleasant, but just dictate your environment, and you can take, and then you take it everywhere. You take it in the gym, you take it on the train, you take it to work, the supermarket.
It is literally the first thing. One of the first things I get clients to do these days when they come on is have a morning routine which involves 1 to 3 minutes in a cold shower.
Brilliant.
And the people who do it are far more disciplined, far more resilient, far more just robust in the kind of decision making, and just get far better results, because it's almost like it creates a no nonsense style of mindset around the whole thing. And every single time when I've programmed it in, I'll get a message within the first couple of days saying, done the cold shower, feel absolutely amazing of doing it. And then they do it every single day.
Sure.
You know, but it doesn't even mean that it's easy to do every day, because every day it's hard, isn't it?
Sure. Absolutely.
I do it in the mornings, I still find it hard.
It still feels rubbish. Of course it does, you know. For anybody that comes out and says, oh, I love it. I love
the thought of it.
I love to feel burning on my skin. I love to feel freezing cold and shivers. You know, nobody likes to feel the cold on the body. But it delivers, like you said in that, you know, and I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages that are the same from people saying this is game changing. You know, it's completely changed. It's uncomfortable, but it's completely
so simple,
and it's
free and accessible for everyone.
Yeah, and it's fashionably reliable, because it's always cold. It's always the same. You know?
Yeah.
So, and you can dictate it, whereas in the day, you know, cold will be cold. You can change the temperature now.
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, I mean, once you've done it quite a lot, and you're probably the same. Obviously, you've got an ice tub, so you can regulate your cold pretty well. You can, and the wild, of course, you mentioned you do the wild. But for me, obviously, I've just got a red bin in my garden.
Sure.
When it gets to summer, I'm just like, I feel like I can't do it in the summer, because it's not even cold enough anymore.
Sure.
I'd have to sit. It wouldn't even be cold enough as in there for half an hour.
Sure.
You know, once when it starts to get to the hotter temperatures. So I guess the fix for that is the wild, though. You just go and do some wild, but be careful with the wild. Obviously, like you said, if you're brand new to it, you don't want to go in on your own. You don't want to flip and go diving headfirst into a river or something like that.
No, always try and keep your feet on the ground. Don't go getting into lakes and reservoirs where you've not got anything under your body, so that you can't stand up. When you're getting used to the cold. And if you're going anywhere where you're swimming, you should always have a flotation device. You shouldn't ever be in a situation where you'll get cramp, because you'll drown.
Of course you will, yeah.
So, you know, if you've got a flotation device, you can lie on your back, you can blow the whistle, you can shout, and you can get somebody to come and help you. But, you know, there have been situations, witnessed situations where people have got into trouble. Fit, healthy, strong men like you, who are out there and they cramp up. Yeah. And they're like, help. It's too late. They're going under. And they can't move their muscles. It's cramp. So you'll drown quick. So, you know, in that situation, you have to try and think fast. You have to lie on your back. You have to be very still and allow your breathing to be regulated until somebody comes to your rescue. You will float, you know, but don't splash about. No. You're in vain.
You were saying this last time, you're just supposed to lie and relax. As scary as that would probably be the hardest thing to do. Sure. Out of any, while you're in that situation, but it's the best thing to do, as you said.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously that situation I was telling you about, I was kind of trapped in a bit of a weir.
So, yeah. Sorry, that's slightly different.
I was under the water, so I just had to let my body relax so that it just pushed me out. It just kind of threw me out, as opposed to swimming against the current, because I couldn't really see and it was dark and it was horrible. But yeah, you don't want to be in a situation like that. Avoid weirs, avoid deep water. Just, you know, take it nice and steady. Yeah. You can still get huge benefits in these little shallow streams and lying in them, and you can still do the same.
Yeah, it's very addictive, I can tell you that firsthand.
Sure, absolutely.
So look, I think the breath is, we've spoke for a good hour just on the cold, but and I think a lot of people are fascinated by the breath.
Sure.
And I know that's what you love to talk about, especially.
Yeah.
And like, yeah. First, like, what got you into the breath? And you mentioned a book. Was it a book you read on the breath you spoke about before? What got you into the breath?
So, obviously, when I first started, I was into sort of the Wim Hof sort of Tumo style of breathing, this sort of cyclic hyperventilation, where you'd hyperventilate for 2 minutes or whatever, 30 breaths, 40 breaths. you'd take a last breath in, you'd a last breath out, and you'd hold your breath with your lungs empty.
Yeah.
And you'd hold your breath for maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes. You'd be without air because you'd offloaded loads of carbon dioxide from the body, so you're removing the alarm to breathe. And this introduction to it was amazing. And I thought, wow, how fast you can change your physiology just by breathing in and out or hyperventilating for a couple of minutes. You can completely, your hands begin to get pins and needles and lightheaded, and around your face feels a little bit numb sometimes. I was like, wow, all these physical sensations of, alkalosis and, sensations in the body was phenomenal. And like I said, the first time I did it, I felt really emotional, and I didn't really know what that was. It was fascinating. I was laid there on my decking, and I'd come out of it. I was like, I feel so emotional.
Why does that happen?
Well, the thing is, we spoke a little bit about when you come and did that session about the body keeping the score, and the organism has an amazing ability of storing information, not on a mind level, but in terms of, when we think about memory and remembering, it's a human thing or an animalistic thing, but we have to think more on a cellular level of what's going on in the organism, and the cells have their own ability to remember, and we think we know quite a lot about the human body and how it works, but we're just kind of skimming the surface really of how intelligent it is. It's perfection, really, evolutionary perfection. And the fascia of your body, this amazing system, thousands of miles of this fascia that's in your body, that's surrounding your tendons, your muscles, your nerves. It's kind of like a computer storage device of how it's storing energy, and it's storing information, the past, emotions, and it's all connected to your vagus nerve and your neural pathway to your brain. It's a remarkable system, and it has its own way of remembering and storing information as to how the organism feels and in what it feels in terms of temperature, where it is in space, altitude, how you feel internally and externally in your consciousness as well. Every environment that you've ever been in, potentially from the womb until your death. So when you start to breathe in a certain way, sometimes you're inviting certain memories from the past, in terms of not memory, but in certain terms of memories in your body, in your fascia in your body. So once you start to deliver it again, it starts to get you to feel certain emotions, basically because the organism doesn't want you to hyperventilate.
No.
So it will try and get you to breathe normally, or if you stop breathing, it will try and do something to get you to breathe again. It'll try and reset you. So it'll use the most efficient way to do that. So it'll either use memories from the past, or it might even just use a moment where you felt so emotional. It'll use something that at the time got you back to safety. So that's generally what would happen when I first started. That time I hyperventilated, it made me emotional because it was kind of reminiscent of a way that I was perhaps breathing in the past when I was frightened. So it kind of mimicked it.
Because people get that a lot, don't they? People get like, it can be laughter though as well, can't it? It can be laughter, like I started chuckling just out of nowhere. You don't know why you're chuckling, but it can be laughter. It can be obviously more like, not necessarily sadness, but you can start crying, can't you, out of nowhere?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Because if you think about the organism and its way of memory or memorizing or remembering the past, when we're in frightening situations, a lot of the time we're hyperventilating, or if we've been through times in the past that have been sad, or we've felt vulnerable, we've generally sort of been breathing through the mouth. And when we've been upset in the past, so if you're doing that constantly for 2 minutes, and the body doesn't kind of like what you're doing, it'll invite you to regulate, to be back at that parasympathetic level again. And how it does that is by showing you or allowing you to feel certain things that will regulate you.
Yeah. So that's where the emotion comes in.
That's where the emotion comes in. Yeah, it's trying to deliver you.
It's fascinating
To level you out.
I liked what you said about, and this is the first time I'd ever heard this, where basically a certain like tempo or style of breath can, to your nervous system, match a certain emotion from way back.
Yeah.
And pull that emotion in so you re-experience it, because your nervous system stores your trauma, basically. It stores your emotion, doesn't it? So you can store it and in your cells, like you say. Sure. So by mimicking that through breath, as you say, the body keeps score. It remembers that emotion. I think that's amazing, really, isn't it? And it explains why breath works, because I've always, prior to actually understanding how it works, from someone who wants to understand why they're doing something and what the actual science is behind it.
Sure. It's
hard to grasp without knowing things like that. But that I think was a really valuable thing to know for someone who's in a similar position.
Sure. And the thing is as well that, you know, if we think about humans on a cellular level, we're trillions and trillions of cells, 300 million potentially chemical explosions happening every second in the human. Very complex system to keep us in this conscious state. You know, you hearing me and your blood being at a certain level on a pH level, and for your hormones and glucose to be released and storing it and thinking about what you're doing later on today, or you might be training later, so it's got to reserve a bit for that. It's an amazing system to keep us on the straight and narrow, maybe for 100 years. So this is constantly working in the background, and it's effortless.
Yeah,
it's just happening, and we take it for granted so much. But the knowledge is power. You know, when it comes to, you know this, you know, we spoke about this the other day. Knowledge is power when it comes to understanding how you feel, and what sensations are going on in your body, what's happening, what are the tingles, what are the pins and needles, what's happening when your heart rate increases, what are your baroreceptors doing, what are your chemoreceptors doing, what are these centers in the brain doing, the amygdala, how does your body work? You know, this is far more important than, you know, we need algebra, we need history, we need to know how many wives Henry VIII had.
Dead important.
To a degree. Yeah. But, you know, kids should definitely be taught at school. It should be on the curriculum. Yeah. And I know it is in biology, but it should be at a different level where they're taught hands-on. You know, this is this. I want you to breathe like this. You're going to feel a bit of this. And it's connecting mind to body in such a unique way that it will help to eventually sort of reduce anxiety.
Don't get me started on the school system of what could change the flipping world if you just did a few things like this with them instead of massive algebra that I've never looked at since we left school.
No, and give you so much of a headache. I mean, I'm not to say, you know, this isn't, you know, obviously there's any maths teachers out there. I'm not, this isn't like, well,
no, let's get it out. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but there's certain things that are important, and in the West we don't focus enough on us as animals. We cannot get away from the fact that we are animals. We're just an organism. And it wasn't really all that long ago, in time scale, that we were in caves covered in hair. And I know that sort of infringes on people's religious beliefs, etc., but, you know, this is obviously my belief, is that, you know, we've evolved from mammals. You know, we've originally come from the ocean. And I think if you go all the way back on a cellular level, the cells are just trying to survive. But they had to adapt just the same as you have to adapt going into your cold bin. And they were put under pressure billions of years ago when life started to form on Earth. They were threatened and they felt vulnerable and they had to adapt. And that's why we're all here. It's why all this stuff is here, because it was allowed to, because cells were allowed to feel frightened and adapt. So if we think of it more on that sort of scale, as opposed to focusing primarily on the human makes it confusing, because we start to introduce religion and love. And
if we were just being an animal, we'd we'd probably be quite healthy, wouldn't we? Really, if we were just, we probably would be, wouldn't we? If we didn't think too much, like, and think we know better than the organism, we'd probably be quite healthy, really, wouldn't we?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you've only got to look at the state of the world. I mean, it's ran by male ego, and you know, and obviously by some religions as well. And you've got to be realistic. You know, now I think these days, you know, scientifically we know so much now that we need to sort of focus on that more now than ever, because it helps to explain. I do, you know, I'm not sort of against the sort of spiritual sort of side of it or religious side of it, but scientifically it's quite reliable, this. And I think that the science is going to help with the anxiety more than people think. You know, because a lot of people struggle with spirituality. A lot of people struggle with, you know, chakras and energy and life force in the body. There's a lot of people would switch off with that. A lot of men would definitely switch off with that. But when you give them science, when you tell them,
you can't really argue with it, can you? Then
you can't. I mean, some of it's questionable, you know, but a lot of it's tested in labs. A lot of it's, you know, a lot of the stuff that I read is from, you know, Andrew Huberman's lab, the work that he does, and various others. And Patrick McKeown, who, you know, I work for and with in Ireland as part of the Oxygen Advantage. Yeah, it's based on biochemistry and science. What's going on in the human body, and this is stuff that we've known since 1906. You know, the Bohr effect, how we get oxygen.
What's the Bohr effect
in the body? So basically, yeah, the Bohr effect it can be quite complex to sort of explain that, but as mammals, as human beings, we're inhaling and exhaling, taking a breath about sort of 20 to 30,000 times a day. So oxygen has to come in at around about 14 pounds per square inch atmosphere at sea level. We need to take a breath in, and oxygen has to go then from a gas into the hemoglobin in your blood, and it has to get there efficiently. And to do that, it needs a certain amount of CO2 in the blood. And if it's not getting, if there's not enough CO2 in your blood, it can affect how oxygen is delivered to hemoglobin, or the uptake of oxygen to hemoglobin in your lungs. And then it can affect then, once oxygenated blood is pushed around your body, how that oxygen then offloads onto cells, and how that oxygen offloads into your brain. So the level of carbon dioxide in your arterial blood is pretty critical. If you're hyperventilating, there's a good possibility that you're offloading too much of that carbon dioxide, which affects the Bohr effect, which is how oxygen comes in, it attaches to hemoglobin, it's then pushed around your body, and with the right amount of CO2 in the blood, it releases it. If CO2 is low in the blood, hemoglobin starts to have an affinity to oxygen. It won't let go of it, won't release it. It just ends up coming back.
So then your tissue's not getting oxygenated, yeah?
And it's also, like you mentioned before, then it's not getting nutrients either, because sometimes oxygen is delivering nutrients.
Yeah, okay. So people demonise carbon dioxide and think it's just something to get rid of, but actually it's got this very positive effect of, well, the body's reacting to it, yeah?
Massively, yeah. And I think CO2 plays a key role in anxiety, because anxiety and the drive to breathe are kind of linked together. Stress and the drive to breathe, or over-breathing creating stress. They're kind of like what they refer to as like negative feedback loops that we're in. So, you know, CO2 is playing a role in how we are as animals, in terms of how we focus and in terms of how we perceive our external environments, but more importantly, how we perceive ourselves on the internal. Yeah. So when we go to doctors or to therapists, we know we're asked a lot of the time about what's going on at home, what's happening at work, you know, how are things, you know, in your life, you know, what's going on. Well, actually, what's going on is here. A lot of it's going on inside, and we're not asking the right questions sometimes. And interoceptive information or interoceptive perception of you and your internal environment can be the main source of your issue.
Yes, I think that's an amazing point, because I almost say it's like, in a way, it's like, I say a lot of the time, I'll say to people, you don't necessarily have to control your stress in terms of change the situations in your life. That can be a part of it, of course.
Yeah.
But by doing things like this, you actually improve your stress tolerance, meaning your body's not reacting. So basically, how I see it is that if I could have someone look at me, say something to me in one way on one day, but there could be underlying physiological things that are making me react to that in a much more stressful way, because maybe I'm deprived of oxygen, maybe I've not slept very well, maybe I'm just like, my cortisol levels are already up anyway for other reasons.
Sure.
So then I react like excessively, but 2 days later I've slept well, my breath's been nice and relaxed, I'm calm. Same thing doesn't affect you. So it's like the stress tolerance is how I always say it to people. You can't get in today's world, you can't really, there's only so much you can do for someone's actual stressors.
Sure.
But by doing all this stuff, the cold is another great way of doing this, yeah. But the breath,
Sure.
which we're just going to go into a lot now,
Sure.
is another great way of increasing that stress tolerance, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think you've outlined it really well there, really, because it, depending on how you perceive certain other animals and how they're reacting to you, I think 80 and 90% of communication is physical. So if you're hypersensitive to environment because you're over breathing potentially, hyperventilation syndrome or chronic hyperventilation syndrome, you could be perceiving threat when there's actually no threat there, which is sometimes what's connected to things like ADHD as well. So when you go into an environment, you're focused on everything. It seems really loud. There's lots of things going on. Actually, there isn't. But it's just how you're perceiving that environment, because your body is already high cortisol, high adrenaline. So if you can undo that, if you can change the biochemistry, the internal, it affects how you perceive your environment on the external. So you can do that by holding your breath. You can do that by changing how your body reacts to the drive to breathe, which is carbon dioxide. So that does help to improve. Obviously, once you're doing all the other stuff as well, you're exercising, you're moving, you're keeping that fascia moving, and you're not allowing it to sort of become allowing the fluid to run away and it becoming sort of more crystallized and hardened. You're allowing it to flow in your body. So movement is critical as well in terms of being healthy. And, part of that movement is your diaphragm. So, your diaphragm is not just a part of your breathing. It's also increasing pressure in your abdominal cavity, which is helping with digestion. Yeah. And the movement of your gut. So, hyperventilators have gut trouble. They have acid reflux and irritable bowel syndrome. So there's just so much dysfunction connected to people who are not regulating their breathing. Yeah. Slower breathing is far better for you than this shallow upper chest.
And down, yes. Yeah. And that's like, there's loads of people, and I was like this, like when people first start talking to me about breath, I was just like, almost like, what are you talking about? I've been breathing my whole life. I do all right, But it's not as simple as that, really, is it? It's not as simple as that, because as you said to us, you can have dysfunctional breathing that can be caused. Well, it could be caused from trauma when you're really young, or it could be caused from just reacting to a situation from a couple of days ago, I guess. Your body, like you said with the phone, if you've had a stressful message and you've held your breath because you're under stress, and then every time you look at your phone, your body remembers. So you go back into that. So but the question basically is, why do we even need to think about it? Like we breathe, everyone's breathing, otherwise they'd be dead.
Sure.
But I think you do a great job of explaining why is it even relevant that people think about this as a means to improve their health and improve mental health as well.
I think even if you just put things in order of how we do them, when you're in the womb for 9 months, you're not breathing, obviously, because you're being kept alive by your mother. But the first thing you do independently when you come out is you take a breath. So it's pretty important, I would say, in terms of us going forward as an organism. The first thing that you physically do, along with crying, but you need to take a breath first to do that. And not all babies cry, I know that. People are like, oh, well, my babies don't cry, but yes, a lot do.
Everyone loves to say that.
Yeah, they do, yeah. But they do, unfortunately. But the first thing you do when you come out is you breathe, and you can last for weeks without food and days without water, but only about 4 minutes without air. So it is critical to life, and every cell in your body needs oxygen. So it goes without saying that if you don't breathe correctly for that 20 to 30,000 times a day, however how fast it is you're breathing or how many breaths you're taking per minute, if you're not breathing correctly, then you are affecting your uptake of oxygen. You are affecting your internal state and how you perceive your external environment and your internal environment. You're changing your biochemistry, and you're affecting your whole life. There's loads of sort of dysfunction connected to overbreathing. Snoring is one of them. We spoke a little bit about snoring and sleep apnea. It's getting worse. Sleep apnea,
more common.
Yeah, sure. It is far more common now than it ever has been before, and more women are ending up on CPAP
So what do you think is behind that then? Why is it getting more common?
I think it's probably stress, Dom, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Chronic stress and lifestyle. You know, sugar is not helping. It's causing a lot of problems. And
it's interesting to say stress, because it's like you say, it's like a feedback loop.
Yeah.
You get stressed. Sorry. You're not breathing very well, you get more stressed. Sure. You get stressed, you don't breathe very, it affects your breathing, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So in that instance then, would you say the best intervention you can do is work on controlling your breath and having proper oxygen uptake? Then I guess would be the best way to start reducing and controlling that stress, yeah?
100%, mate, yeah. And it's exactly that negative feedback loop that you end up in, which is what's happening with ADHD, really. And, you know, in a recent study in America, I think it was somewhere around about 80% of children with ADHD are mouth breathing.
It's crazy, that.
Snoring.
Yeah, crazy.
So those levels they're far too high, and they're constantly in this sort of negative feedback loop of over-breathing. And by over-breathing or hyperventilating, you're kind of telling the brain that you're frightened all the time. So what the brain does when it's frightened is it over-breathes even more, and it also ends up sort of kind of drip-feeding you adrenaline all the time, which, you know, kids with ADHD, it's like they're on Red Bull all day in the morning. They're on high adrenaline, high cortisol, then they come back in the afternoon and they're completely wiped out. And then because they wipe out and they feel so tired, sometimes they're falling asleep on their desks at school.
Yeah.
I was one of those kids.
Yeah.
And then you struggle to sleep at night then, because, you know, you've released adrenaline again, and we've got so many more opportunities to get adrenaline now because of these things. Yeah. So you're constantly swiping different environments. So you're inviting these different environments to the body. Oh, you're laughing 1 minute. Oh God.
Yeah, it's so up and down.
Up and down, yeah. All over the place. So that brings its own stress. And the thing is that stress in the body, that release of chemicals, your adrenals releasing epinephrine, adrenaline, this system to mobilize us as animals is ancient. And it's a system that was designed to keep us alive, to stop us being chased by animals and being eaten in the wild, or other tribes attacking us. And that same system now is just being witnessed in bedrooms, on computer games, you know, when
constantly.
Kids...
Yeah, it's overloaded, isn't it, really?
Sure. I mean, I've watched my own son playing on a computer game where he's and his heart rate is up, you can see. And then and he comes up, whatever. And then he comes and says, oh, by the way, mate, your teeth, I'm coming now. Ah.
You're already a bit like riled up.
So he's releasing adrenaline on the computer game. Only he's just sat in his bedroom. He can't go anywhere. He's not. He can't run off to expel that adrenaline. He's just got to be in the environment. And schools are full of adrenaline.
Yeah.
In kids, they're drinking high sugary drinks. They've caffeine, adrenaline.
God, I used to fall asleep, and I used to be like, I'm sure I had ADHD. Come flipping 12 o'clock, I would be sleeping.
Completely wiped out. Yeah.
You could forget it. After lunch, you could forget any work.
That was me. That was me, daydreaming or asleep.
Just could not. I was literally just counting down the seconds to go home.
Absolutely. I'd constantly be, Kevin.
Yeah, every time.
Falling asleep, mate. And I wake up and all the classroom would be laughing. Falling asleep again, Kev. But in those days, they didn't know it was ADHD. They just thought I was disruptive.
Yeah.
Oh, Kevin's been winding everybody up again, or he's stormed off in a mood, or he's swore, or he's been shouting. And it was because I was constantly breathing through my mouth, Dom. Asthma.
So tell me about that then. Like, why is breathing out your mouth not something? Why was that affecting you?
Because I had asthma. And I've always had asthma since I was about 5. Obviously, when I spoke to you on your session, I don't really have a prescription for an inhaler anymore. I have one if I ever need it, but I don't ever get any symptoms of asthma. I ran near as damn it 10 miles. I ran to Stockport yesterday, breathing through my nose with my mouth taped shut. If somebody had said that to me 3 years ago, I'd have laughed my head off. Maybe a bit longer, 3 years ago, because I wouldn't have gone anywhere without my inhaler. In fact, I'd have felt almost a bit panicky if I couldn't find my inhaler and I was going for a run. I'd be, where's my inhaler? I don't run with an inhaler anymore. I don't need one. So what's changed? And the problems I had at school was about mouth breathing, and I think I was upper chest breathing as well, and I felt anxious a lot of the time, and there was all sorts of other physiological things that were going on with me. I had my own sort of traumas and my own issues as a human, as we all do. But breathing through the mouth is you're far more likely to be breathing shallow if you breathe through the mouth, and you're not reaping the benefits of nasal breathing. And if you open your mouth and look in the mirror, so anybody watching, if you open your mouth, look in the mirror, everything in your mouth is to do with food and drink. It's nothing to do with your respiratory function in the body. So you've got teeth, your taste buds, saliva. The movement of your tongue is to drop food down into your gullet. Everything's to do with food, whereas the nose, it sort of has about sort of 20 odd different functions, according to one scientist, in the body. So when you breathe through your nose, you're breathing through sort of spirals and turbinates. It's pressurizing the air as it goes into the small air sacs of your lungs, these alveoli that we were talking about before. It catches any particulates, any dust, pollen, and viruses as well. So you have a far less chance of contracting things like influenza and even COVID. A less chance of getting it if you're nasal breathing.
Really? That's fascinating.
Sure.
Why is that? Because it's being captured rather than being pulled in through the mouth?
Sure. Because this is just a gateway into the lungs. It's just straight into your body. Whereas with the nasal cavity, this sort of billiard ball shaped cavity that's above the top of your mouth, it's filled with sort of spirals and turbinates, flaps of skin, different sort of textures of skin and mucus, hairs. And the air has to be processed through this cavity before it's pushed down into the lungs. And on the way in, it's gathering nitric oxide, which is pooled naturally on an exhale. We pull nitric oxide in the nasal cavity, and then on that inhale, then we take nitric oxide into the small air sacs of the lungs, and it dilates blood vessels in the alveoli. So nitric oxide was only discovered on the exhale of a human in 1991.
Wow.
So quite late. But there have also in some places in America, I read that they were using nitric oxide to kill COVID. So it's a natural antiviral chemical that we produce sort of 15 to 18% more of in the nasal cavity.
So I guess if it's all in there and it's antiviral and you're breathing in viruses or anything like that, it's then being almost eliminated before it can even enter the body.
Exactly. So this is the first line. The nose is the first line of defense against anything that's airborne. And not only that, it's making the air cool. Sorry, I just hit your microphone. It's making the air cooler in hot temperatures. It's making the air warmer in cold temperatures. So it's your respiratory regulatory system, and we're bypassing it. And we're bypassing it because of lifestyle. We're bypassing it because of the amount of talking that we're doing too much talking. Even now, I can feel
anxiety levels going through the roof.
Well, I feel hotter.
Yeah.
I feel not as relaxed as when I came in here. And I can feel those subtle changes in my body because I'm constantly talking, and when I'm talking,
Yeah, it's all mouth. Well, a lot of it's mouth, yeah.
Sure. And we do more, we communicate now more than ever. So if we just tell people to breathe through their noses, even when they're training, try and breathe through your nose as much as you can. As soon as you get an extra demand for oxygen, you'll know it. Your body will, I'm not getting enough. And then just, try and breathe in through your nose at that point, and then breathe out through your mouth. Try and regulate it.
And what are the benefits of this? So like for people watching who are kind of thinking, why do I even need to do this? Why should they do it? Why should they even think more about their breath? But more so, why should they, because I think a large amount of people are mouth breathers, like you say, why should they start to think more about this rather than this? Rather
than the mouth. Obviously Google it, and do homework, because you'll find it interesting. I know I'm a bit of a geek, a pulmonaut, whatever you want to call it. And I'm fascinated by how the respiratory system works, but how it's connected to your mindset and your brain state, your focus and your attention is directly connected to how you breathe. So there's just so many factors into why we should be breathing nasally than why we should be breathing instead of breathing through the mouth. One, it tells the brain that we're more relaxed if we're breathing through the nose. We're getting more oxygen. We're more likely to be breathing diaphragmatically if we're breathing through the nose, which means that we're getting more blood oxygen saturation in the body. If we breathe through our nose, our carbon dioxide levels are going to be far more balanced if we breathe through the nose, because this is a narrower passage to breathe through. The mouth is forgiving. It's 3/4 of an inch, that big gateway to the lungs. So sometimes we can step into mouth breathing because we've been ill or something's happened to us in the past, but the nervous system won't switch back, because this is a much easier way to get air into the body. Unfortunately, on a biochemical level, it affects how your chemoreceptors, your blood monitors in your body, react to the build-up of carbon dioxide, and that reaction to carbon dioxide is directly connected to anxiety. So if you can change your biochemistry by altering your biomechanics, so breathing longer, breathing slower, and breathing deeper, that will affect your biochemistry. And then you have to think about how many times you're breathing per minute. So the volume, the cadence, the flow.
Yeah.
So there's three kind of pillars, really, to good breathing. You've got the biomechanics, the biochemistry, and the kind of flow, the volume, your end tidal volume of oxygen that you're taking into your body. So if we focus more on breathing slowly, we're going to be getting more oxygen uptake in the body, which is going to reduce symptoms of anxiety, panic disorder. It's going to improve gut problems. It's going to help sleep. It's going to stop people snoring. It's going to reduce snoring. It's going to reduce sleep apnea. It's going to reduce obstructive sleep apnea, which can be fatal. But ADHD, it's going to reduce symptoms of ADHD if kids are getting more oxygen and they're slowing down, they're down-regulating because they're constantly in upregulated states. And focus and attention is so important. Nobody ever tells us Everybody always tells us, pay attention, focus on this, focus on that, but they don't tell us how to do it.
No, I can relate to that because I sound very similar to you in the sense that my head was just all over the place in school. I couldn't take in anything. I used to get to the end of a lesson and I've not done anything, not even put a pen to paper because I'd just be like head all over the show. And I guess this could be one aspect of why that might have been the case for me.
Yeah.
Not trying to flip and find a way out of why I didn't do the work in school, but you know, it could be that definitely a contributing factor. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I would say almost certainly that at the time you probably could have been, over breathing and maybe not getting as much oxygen or blood flow to the brain as you could have done optimally if you were breathing slower. This is science. You've only got to reduce, I think, your CO2 levels by as much as 2 millimeters of mercury to get up to, it's like an 8% reduction in blood flow to the brain. So, it's, if you're chronically hyperventilating, you're always getting less oxygen flow to the brain. So,
because people know that if you get if you're deprived of oxygen and you reach one of those hypoxic states where all your tissues are getting low oxygen, obviously if you're actually in hospital because you have low oxygen, and that goes on for too long, you get damage to every single tissue in the body.
Sure.
But this is almost like a silent level. It's not like noticeable within an hour, 2 hours, even a couple of days. This is something that if you're just reducing that oxygen uptake 24/7, and this goes on for months and years, then you're constantly getting almost like a silent hypoxia is a term I've heard. I don't think it's not quite related to this in particular, but it's like such a low level of it, but over time it causes huge issues. Yeah.
Of course it does. Yeah, it's massive, and it is that. And if you're constantly doing that, for sort of 20 years, what impact is it having on a cellular level in your body? You're far more likely to have cardiovascular issues, high blood pressure, and thyroid issues. Bodies that are low in oxygen are more susceptible to things like diabetes, and even cancer is connected to bodies that are very low in oxygen, which is why Christie's still send people to hyperbaric chambers who've got cancer, because they know that most cancers don't like oxygen-rich environments. So why don't they just tell us to breathe in such a way with a reliable Bohr effect? Breathe in such a way that your body's getting more oxygen.
Permanently, yeah.
Permanently, which is ideally through the nose. There are some people that I've worked with, Dom, who I say, I want you to just breathe through your nose, I want you to close your mouth. They close their mouth, okay? Oh, God, I'm sorry.
Really? Wow.
I'm not getting enough air. 10 seconds, maybe.
So is that to do with structural issues with the nasal cavity? Or is that just due to kind of not being... basically not using the nasal cavity, so it feels uncomfortable, it feels alien, they're so used to breathing out the mouth?
Sure. To be honest, it's a mixture of all of it.
Okay.
And if you don't use your nose, you lose the function of it. Which is why people who mouth breathe, they tend to wake up in the morning bunged up, and they're more likely to get things like rhinitis and sinusitis, stuffy nose and hay fever and asthma, sore throats all the time. So there's symptoms of this kind of overbreathing. But the real cause of it, the real reason why they feel suffocated, is because of their false alarm to take a breath. Because years and years of mouth breathing causes issues with your chemoreceptors in your body, your blood monitors, and they become sensitive, they become overreactive to increasing levels of CO2 in the blood that normally a healthy human, a healthy breather, wouldn't really recognise as alarm. So it's that we can change with Oxygen Advantage, and by holding your breath, doing certain exercises, and by doing, you know, a variation of different exercises whilst holding your breath, you're increasing your carbon dioxide levels in different ways in the body, that eventually your chemoreceptors start to get used to the levels of CO2 building up. So prolonged sort of exercise of holding the breath, building up CO2, the body causes adaptation, just like it causes adaptation to getting used to the cold, because the human body has an amazing ability to adapt. And it's adapted to breathing through the mouth for so long, it'll go back, it'll switch, which is what I did, Dom, which enables me now to do that 10-mile run yesterday with my mouth taped shut. Whereas at the beginning, I tried to run 500 yards and I had to drag the tape off. I felt as though I couldn't get any oxygen. Whereas I know now that that was a false alarm. So by constantly holding my breath and building up CO2 in the body, I was able to change the flexibility of my chemoreceptors. And that's what's helping asthmatics, because it's changing the drive to breathe. So the teenagers, the people that, you know, even the adults that, I wasn't getting enough air, after, you know, maybe 4 or 5 weeks, maybe even a bit longer of these breath hold exercises. And the next time I see them, I want you to close your mouth. They're fine. Because their body's not, it's changing your reaction to CO2 in the body. So that's physically changing your biochemistry by just performing some simple exercises, holding your breath.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I think like just that when I see you going, just you doing that breath almost elicits stress onto the body. If I was just to breathe out my mouth quickly, I almost feel more anxious just straight away doing it. You know, it's interesting, isn't it?
Do I need to say any more?
No.
So you feel more anxious when you breathe through your mouth. When I get anybody to sit down and say, look, breathe through your nose if they can. Take 4 seconds in through your nose and breathe out for 6 seconds. And they say, so how do you feel when you get to the bottom? I feel quite chilled, quite relaxed. So if you go to the doctors with anxiety, why aren't they asking how you breathe?
No, surface level, and it's not looking at the root cause of stuff, is it?
No, it's, are you being bullied at school, and what are you doing? What are you doing at home? What are you eating? You know, how's your stress levels? They're not really asking the right questions. You know, ask how the animal is breathing, because if you put, you know, 10 people in here and I look at them breathe individually, I'll tell you which ones are stressed. Generally.
Tell me.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I can tell. Yeah, because people who are stressed, they breathe up a chest. They don't have.
What am I doing?
They don't have that natural pause. You're a good breather, Dom, and you know, when you come into the pod with Katie, you know, I could see where you were with your breathing, but you're somebody who's been focused on it and who knows the difference. The people that I work with panic disorder and anxiety and with hormonal problems, or they've got they're menopausal or they're perimenopausal, or people that have got PTSD and trauma, they're generally stuck in fight or flight. They're up here. They're not breathing. They're not opening their lungs and breathing deep enough.
I just think this is literally what people need to hear in terms of, like, obviously anxiety is massive these days. Like, it just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. As in, people I know just randomly having panic attacks and they can't really connect why. But now when you mention that they're just kind of shallow breathing all the time, they don't think there's anything wrong with that. But then the body's going to think, I'm being starved of oxygen, I'm under stress, all this is going on, and suddenly they have a panic attack, and it all makes sense as to why that might happen. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but it could be a huge driver of why people are just getting random anxiety attacks without any stressor.
Absolutely, which is generally interoceptive information, not external. There might have been an external trigger that they've not noticed. But I would say the vast majority of people that have panic attacks have them when they least expect them.
Yeah, it is. People do, don't they? That's the thing. They just get them.
Supermarkets.
Random, yeah.
Sat in the cinema.
And often there's no stressor, yeah? There's absolutely no obvious stressor.
No. their hands start to tingle. They start to feel this overwhelming doom, as if they can't breathe. I need to get out. Fight or flight. But at that point, then you've already released adrenaline.
Yeah, and it's too late.
It's too late. So if you know where those stresses happen, it's obviously a lot easier to regulate.
Yeah.
But you'll tend to find that those people are hyperventilating before they
even get to that point. Yeah, and then it's just exacerbated, I guess, when they start down the panic attack. When that starts, it probably just gets worse.
Sure, absolutely. And the thing is, I think I spoke to somebody the other day who has a drink before they go out. Sometimes people have a drink before they go out because that'll help to sort of relax their breathing muscles and they start to slow down their breathing. But by the time the alcohol sort of gets into the body properly, then the heart rate increases. So they're more anxious when they're out. Is over breathing causing problems with violence and things out in pubs and clubs and bars? Because there's a lot of people that go out and they're holding themselves in. Okay.
Oh God,
so when you want to look nice in your t-shirt with your guns out, what do you do? and if you're holding yourself in to look good in your t-shirt, where's your breathing?
Short, very short. Very short.
So you mix that with alcohol, okay? Upper chest breathing, not getting a lot of oxygen flow to the brain. Pop.
Yeah, heavy stress.
Yeah. Vulnerable environments with other alphas about, in those stressful days. Oh, what's he looking at? Nothing, mate. He's absolutely not.
That alarm system is already going for numerous reasons,
Sure. He's already a threat. Before he was already a threat when you were in the other bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you come in
you're
there,
already looking for it.
Your nervous system is in it because of how you're breathing. So holding in is not a good thing. Tight clothing is not good.
No.
Sports bras and things like that, they're restrictive.
Oh God, because some of those are very tight. I know, because the ones I wear I'm joking.
Yeah, but tight tops. I've when I was in better shape, I'd run with tight tops on, and I'd take the top off. I was like, oh, wow, I can breathe easier now. I've not got this lycra, this tight top on.
Yeah, you never think about that, but I guess it puts resistance against the diaphragm from moving in the way it needs to move, so it 100%. Probably makes it just harder to do, I guess.
Sure. What do women do when they take a sports bra or they take a bra off? Anyone that's watching will probably say,
big breath.
They breathe out. So you're physically breathing out after removing an item of clothing, and when you undo your trousers after a big meal, you breathe out because you're allowing your diaphragm to just drop. So even the clothes that we wear can affect how we feel, so because of the way that we breathe, because it can restrict breathing.
So, right, I know of the Wim Hof breath work, I know of standard diaphragmatic breath work, holotropic breath work, but I don't really know what the purpose behind each one is beyond the basic, like Wim Hof's quite stimulatory, yeah. People can use it to kind of get themselves going in the morning and stuff like that.
Sure.
But do you work with people? Do you look at someone as an individual and go, okay, you need this specific kind of breath work for individual people, or is it?
Yeah.
How does it work?
Well, it's a tricky one, that, because it's not like one size shoe fits all really with breathing, and sometimes anxious people who do the Wim Hof method find it really beneficial, whereas there's quite a lot of them who find that they just can't do it because it just takes them straight into their anxiety, and they say, oh, I'm not doing that again. It just makes them too frightened. So some works for some works for others. You can do sort of single nostril breathing, you can do humming, you can do hyperventilation techniques, you can do belly breathing, you can do upper chest breathing, you can lie down and breathe, you can sit up and breathe. There's loads of different modalities with breath work. Breath work is generally associated to hyperventilation because it's work. You're working. Most of what I'm doing now is getting people to try and breathe slower, so it's down regulating with oxygen advantage. And the reason I think that's going to be more beneficial, Dom, is because people are trying to get out of upregulated states most of the time. So when you say to people, why are you doing this? They say, I'm stressed.
Yeah.
I lost my mum. My marriage broke up. You know, it's the things that upregulate us that make us feel wounded or vulnerable or sad. So I think it has a huge importance. I'm not particularly keen on the way the market is for transformative or regressive breathing. I call it regressive because you're sort of going back, really. Your body's going back a little bit, stepping back, taking you back to a time when you were in a certain state. But like I said, there's a lot of people out there at the moment. They're selling weird gizmos to help you breathe, and there's these bits of kit that go in your mouth and things that go up your nose to stop you having sleep apnea and that. And just breathe through your nose. Okay, I think if there are certain times when regressive breathing is needed and transformative breath is needed for people, and it's so beneficial for so many people, because what it invites is process, and a lot of the time people are stuck in a certain state and they don't necessarily understand why, and it's because we're not always offered a picture in the mind of what it is. We can generally work out why we're upset as animals and what's getting to us and what's making us feel vulnerable or anxious, because of things that we can either see, or we can hear, or we can smell or taste. The thing is with trauma and PTSD, it's a feeling sometimes, so we can't see it and we can't really attach to it. It's just there,
something that takes over you,
something that just and you don't really know what it is. So what regressive breathing or transformative breath work will allow you to do is put yourself into a physical position using the fascia of your body, your blood pressure, your breath, to take you back into a time where you felt vulnerable. And your nervous system, it might just show you it. If you're lucky enough, it might just show you an image of what that is. All of a sudden you'll just be taken back. Yeah,
because you do hear people having experiences like that with breathwork, don't you?
And they say, "Oh God, I was." People say, "Oh, I was back in the womb." You know, people say I could just see myself as in a child. I've had somebody say that I was in a beer garden with my dad eating these unusual sweets. Something I've not thought about.
Fascinating, isn't it?
For many, well, there's a reason that your nervous system has shown you that. So it's very useful for that, Dom. It really, really is. And it's allowing people to process. It's not releasing trauma. And I keep saying this. You won't remove the fundamental survival instinct of your body to get you back to safety. You know, and I mentioned to you the other day, in 1872, Charles Darwin said that the fundamental purpose of human emotions is to get the organism back to safety, physical equilibrium, to mobilize you. That part of your body is always there. You won't remove it. You won't release it.
No.
In a tent with 10 people. You might witness something again, and you might be able to go away from that session or that breath work or a program or whatever it is that you're in, and allow yourself to process it. But it will always be part of you.
It'll always be there, affecting you in some form.
Yeah, it will always be there. You'll never quite remove it, because all you have to do is replicate it, and it'll show you.
And it'll remember exactly the feeling and everything. Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
sure.
It's interesting because people these days are talking about healing emotion, healing trauma. You know, healing. And I guess it's more so about processing it, and becoming more resilient to it, and not allowing your current life to be your present to be affected so much. In such a way, you know, because the problem with trauma is it affects us in the present world when it's not necessarily required, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas if the thing comes again, we need that trauma was the effect of the trauma was beneficial, wasn't it? Because it's helped us to avoid that happening again.
Yeah.
So that reaction is then useful, but it's when that reaction is coming, it's popping off in every corner of our lives because we're not processing it very well, you know. So I guess the breath helps. Is that right in saying that through doing the breath you can at least help to process it?
Sure. A lot of the time as well, because it's a physical thing and your breathing is so connected to that specific moment, that specific trauma, the PTSD, whatever it is that you witnessed, whatever it is that you went through. If you're physically in a certain pattern of breathing all the time, you're constantly reliving it. You might be reliving it every day, several times a day, reliving the same trauma in your body, not witnessing it in the mind, but your physiology is feeling it every day. And your chronic stress could be your PTSD, your trauma. So when you said the word react there, so you're reacting to an internal state. If you slow down your breathing and you regulate your breathing, which is completely at the other end of the ladder from how your breathing was at the time of your trauma or your traumatic event or your PTSD, the animal will feel different. So that's where it's hugely beneficial to be able to breathe slower and to regulate and understand that changing your biochemistry will help your alarm to take another breath, which is anxiety, which is connected to anxiety. So I'll still carry on, using regressive breath work, but people just need to know that, about the contradictions of heavy breathing and being hypoxic. The truth of the matter is, Dom, is that when you hyperventilate your body, if you do holotropic breathing, well, Stanislav Grof and his wife, who sort of created this sort of breathing technique, and I don't know the exact ins and outs of it, late 60s, early 70s, when they banned LSD and all this sort of thing, that was all connected to it. So they created this this form of breathing to help people sort of regress, etc., etc. But the brain thinks you're dying when you're doing it. It releases DMT, which they think is some kind of a chemical that's produced. I'm almost certain it could be pineal gland.
Pineal gland, yeah. It's secreted from pineal gland when you're about to die and when you dream.
Yeah, this is the thing, yeah. So when you're dying, is it a last-ditch attempt, DMT, to bring you back? Is it like the final kickstart? Yeah, or is it just I have this to make it a bit easier?
To have a nice way out.
Have a nice way out. That's a human thought, I think. Yeah. I think it's probably more than likely a kickstart.
Trying to get you back to life.
Trying to snap you back.
And I guess in some circumstances it may work when you have these people who have these near-death experiences. What they're probably experiencing is a DMT, a rush of DMT, is what a lot of people will say.
I saw a light and
rush of DMT, they experience an absolute crazy visuals, out-of-body experience, and then the back.
Yeah,
that could explain the whole thing. Your body's just trying to kickstart you back into life,
Sure, absolutely. And this is what's happening when people are hyperventilating so hard that the nervous system's like, what are you doing? Stop it. Stop it. And it's delivering you stuff. And then, depending on who's facilitating, I think what a lot of them are saying now is that you have the accelerator pedal, you have the brake, you can demand on how much you want. But there are some facilitators that will keep on telling you to press the pedal.
Going, yeah.
And breathe harder, pushing it out of you.
Yeah.
Physically touching the body to try and manipulate. And for some people that works, and for some people it's safe to do that. But I just don't know whether pushing people too hard is a good idea.
No.
And the brain in that point, it does think you're dying. So potentially, okay, and this is what, I'm sort of quoting James Nestor because he said the brain thinks you're dying and it'll deliver these chemicals to try and see if it can snap you out of it, or it will make you so emotional, it will make you burst out laughing.
Yeah.
Because laughing is a way of your body's natural ability to change the rhythm of your respiratory rate. ha 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 ha. So it'll change the
because you're going from that stressed. It's stressed breath. It's forcing you into that laughing and
trying to get you to come out of it. Yeah, or it will make
it's fascinating when you put it like that, you know, because it makes total sense as to why your body would try and make you laugh. Because that's what I get every time. If I do breath, you noticed it the other day. As soon as I start going to those places, I start chuckling.
Safety.
I don't know why, and it's just probably a way of regulating from stressed to more parasympathetic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I did the same when I on an occasion where I did this sort of transformative breathing. I laughed hysterically, and then moments, not long after, hysterically crying. So it'll throw you in all sorts of directions to get you to stop, because obviously once you start crying,
your breath's gone again.
You have to regulate your breathing again. It's trying to regulate your breathing. What it shows you to make you upset, or what it delivers to you to make you upset, you might not even see it. It might just be a feeling. It might just be a sensation in your body, but you'll express it.
Yeah, because you don't. Like when I've done it, you don't know why you're laughing or why you're crying, but it just happens. It's just the feeling in it that comes with it. Yeah.
Sure. You just go with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't stop it.
No.
Loads of people laugh when they start to hyperventilate. Loads of people cry when they start to hyperventilate. And people also do some, other stuff. They do unusual. Their bodies go into unusual positions and shapes. They go into fetal position. They crawl. They hold in their tummies and their middle. And there's it's energy that's sort of stored in the body. It's in the fascia of the body, and it's trying to sort of show you something to get you to stop.
Yeah.
And more often than it does. It wins. Sometimes to the point. The trouble is that it'll also. You become so hypoxic sometimes people pass out. So your body passing out is a way of your body resetting you. And I'm not talking about when I do. I never push anybody to the point where they pass out.
No.
Never do that, because it's for me it's too much.
Too far, yeah.
There is loads of people out there that would sort of allow that to sort of go on, and I'm sure it does happen all the time.
And then they laugh about it, and they almost think it's a great thing.
Sure.
People, that's the kind of, I feel like that almost goes on a lot, where people almost glorify things like that in today's world. Oh, I did breath work for an hour and I passed out and it was such a great experience. It's like, I'm not sure you're supposed to be doing it to that kind of level. You can do too much of a good thing. Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's like doing a deadlift until your nose bleeds.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's probably something a lot of people would go, yeah, I did a deadlift and my nose bled and I carried on doing it, like
it's pushing the body beyond beyond its happy limits, and I think there's a safe way to do it, and there's a safe way to integrate people to allow them to process afterwards and stay in touch with them and look after them and nurture them afterwards, before and afterwards.
But of course.
What's going to be going on this year is people just getting into big gatherings and people who are not trauma informed and are not, as they call it, trauma informed. They're not really aware of
how it works or what the risks of everything, I guess.
Sure. And people are just going to go into it, and and people are going to fall short, and people are going to find themselves in difficult situations with it, because if you pass out, it's your body's reset in trying to get you to stop. You'll
it's a sign you shouldn't probably be doing it quite to that degree. Yeah.
To that level. Yeah.
So. Right. How do people obviously people have got very busy lives, they've got a lot going on, not very time rich. Yeah. How do people integrate this into their life where it can benefit them?
Okay.
But in day to day, because it can often feel like too much to be going and doing, like the Wim Hof technique can go on for 20-25 minutes.
Yeah.
So I know personally, like if I'm trying to train, I'm trying to eat right, I'm trying to do all this stuff, I'm trying to do 25 minutes of breath work, it's flipping. I'm just thinking, what do I lose first? And although I shouldn't probably lose the breath work first,
sure,
it's often the thing that goes. So how do we get it into day-to-day life?
I think, choose, in the morning, you can do up-regulating in the morning because you're going to work or whatever. If you want to up-regulate, and of course you want to down-regulate, want to be relaxed at work, then you down-regulate. So, I suppose if you're a plasterer, you don't really want to sort of down-regulate. You might want to sort of up-regulate a little bit before you go to work. You want to be up-regulate your breathing. So I suppose some heavier breathing in the morning, some hyperventilation techniques would be good.
Yeah. I want to just find out a little bit more about, like, what can people do? Like, I know you do stuff like taping of the mouth to force the nose to breathe. You do that at night. We've started doing that at night as a means to push air through the nasal cavity rather than the mouth. Sure. And that has a lot of effects. So I guess that would be a simple tool for people to do that isn't going to require any more time out of them. Yeah. I know there's risk factors you want to make aware for people who maybe have other issues like sleep apnea and stuff. You said probably not the best. Yeah,
I think, always when there's a lot of sort of fads about at the moment. Mouth taping is one of them. I've done that for probably about 2 years now. Been taping my mouth closed almost every night, unless I've gone somewhere and I've forgotten my tape or whatever. And I generally breathe through my nose anyway now. And it's one of the sort of hacks really in life now that's it's really, really popular. But children, shouldn't be mouth taping because, as adults, we're sort of capable of knowing when we feel a bit sick or whatever, we don't tape up. Kids don't always know. No. So you've got to be careful with it. And I think, although taping up is amazing because it does get the body out of the habit, because we're creatures of habit and breathing is habitual. So if your body's used to breathing through the mouth during the day, it's going to breathe through the mouth at night, which can sometimes unfortunately be snoring. Snoring is dysfunctional in humans, right? Be under no impression that this snoring is acceptable or that it's just what humans do just because there's emojis for it. It's not acceptable. It's nobody should be snoring, and it's causing problems with people, and sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea can be fatal. And there's more and more people ending up on these CPAP machines that are constantly putting oxygen pressure into the body because people keep holding their breath in their sleep, getting apnea. So nip it in the bud sort of early on. So mouth taping is a good thing to do, but just ask. Get advice off somebody who's been doing it. Get advice off your doctor if you feel as though you want to. The likelihood is though if you ask your doctor, they'll say, "Don't be so ridiculous, taping your mouth shut." So you have to be sensible. But I'm an advocate of mouth taping because I think it does make a difference. It makes a big difference because if you sleep for 8 hours, that's 8 hours of potential diaphragmatic breathing. So you're getting more oxygen at night. Your hormones can regulate properly while you're asleep. Your dental hygiene is improved because you're not breathing cold air and drying your mouth out in the night. You shouldn't feel any urge to drink in the middle of the night. It'll stop you going to the toilet in the middle of the night if you're constantly up all the time because there's hormones connected to that. So there's loads of reasons why we should be sort of taping up at night and during exercise.
And that's it. So I know you do a lot of taping up during exercise as well. Sure. Again, to force the oxygen through the nose. And I would have thought, like, if you'd have asked me a while back, I would have thought, oh, flippin' heck, isn't that going to restrict oxygen flow into the body? Is that not the case?
Sure. No. Because at the beginning, you'll feel as if you're not getting enough oxygen. So if you're going to start to nasal breathe when you exercise, you have to take your time. I didn't, obviously, like I said before, I didn't start by doing a half marathon taped up. It was progressive. During lockdown, I was training almost every day, breathing through my nose. And sometimes I was breathing in through my nose and I had to breathe out through my mouth. Because don't forget, the drive to breathe, the suffocation alarm that you feel is carbon dioxide. It's not oxygen.
No.
So the drive to breathe for all mammals is the build-up of carbon dioxide in the body. So when you close your mouth and you go running and you're breathing through your nose, if you feel suffocated, that alarm is coming from your chemoreceptors in your body saying, no, it's too much CO2, you need to get rid. So if you breathe in through your nose and then breathe out through your mouth, because you've increased the passage on the exhale, you're getting rid of the CO2 faster. So it will calm down the chemoreceptors. They'll be like, it's okay. Oxygen, CO2 is going quicker. Eventually, though, over time, this passage, your chemoreceptors will get used to the CO2 that this passage creates in the biochemistry, so you won't get the alarm. So
and that's the adaptation that we were talking about at the very start. And so eventually, most people probably will feel a little bit out of breath through breathing through the nose if they've not done it,
sure,
especially if they're doing exercise. But again, it's about building that tolerance up. Then I guess, why is that beneficial? Because they're getting more oxygen into, and then it takes us back to everything we've said. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
More oxygen uptake. You're breathing more diaphragmatically. Your branches 16. So basically, in terms of your lungs, when I say breathe diaphragmatically, we're trying to breathe to the 23rd branch of your bronchioles. So your air comes in down through your trachea, then it splits up, looks like a tree upside down. So it splits off into 2, into 4, into 8, 16, and on and on and on and on and on. And the actual size of the actual volume of your lungs is about 70 square meters. It's massive. It's huge. So branches 16 to 23 is where most of that oxygenation is taking place. That's where most of the alveoli activation is taking place in your lungs, gas exchange. If you're shallow breathing or breathing through your mouth, you're probably not reaching branch 23. Wow. You're probably not getting anywhere near it. You're only probably breathing up to branches maybe 18 or 19, maybe, just not really using your lungs to capacity. Which is why even people that were quite fit, who were struggling with COVID, and people saying, "Wow, he's a triathlete or whatever. Why is he having problems with COVID?" It's because they were probably hyperventilating before they got COVID.
Yeah, and it's proven. This is almost a little bit off topic, but
yeah,
if you're not using your full lung capacity because you're shallow breathing, you're more likely to get fluid build-up on the lungs, and then you're more likely to get pneumonia, which is actually what most people were dying from with COVID, rather than actually the COVID. They were dying from the pneumonia off the back of the COVID. So it's interesting to the levels to which it impacts the whole body it's never ending, really, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. And the ability for the body to sigh as well, it's important. I know I go on about constantly sighing and yawning in the afternoons as a sign of hyperventilation, which it is. It's a symptom of a chronic hyperventilation syndrome. But we also need the sigh as well. We need to be able to sigh to get that larger breath, to keep those alveoli, those air sacs, keep them open. I was talking to you about this to Kate before, to Katie. So it's important that we're breathing deep and diaphragmatic, and we're using our lungs to capacity. However, if we're breathing shallow, the reason we're breathing shallow might be because of the alarm to breathe, because it won't allow us to get empty. Because when we're emptying, if you imagine that the diaphragm sort of moves up, I'm using the wrong direction there, but as your lungs are emptying, it's taking a long time. So the CO2 is building up, so it's setting the alarm to take a breath again, but your lungs are empty, potentially. So you're not really using your lungs to capacity either way.
No.
So you're not getting good gas exchange. You're not getting a lot of oxygen into your bloodstream. You're not getting a lot of oxygen, but you're also getting rid of too much carbon dioxide, and that's causing huge amounts of problems. So good breathing. If you remember the words LSD, long, slow, deep breaths.
I like that.
Diaphragmatic. Yeah.
I wonder why.
Yeah. Everybody remembers the word LSD. So let us LSD. So, and that dramatically improves your breathing on every level. And this alarm for CO2 is super important. I mean, they did some experiments with mice where they they had a group of mice and they managed to get them to slow their breathing down. I don't know the science connected to it, but they gave these mice 30 minutes a day of slower breathing. Okay, they managed to slow their breathing down, and it kind of mimics meditating really, or breath work meditation. And at the end of a certain amount of time, so many weeks, they had control mice. Mice breathe quite fast generally, so they were trying to slow down the breathing to see how slower breathing affect their alarm response. They use mice because they're pretty reliable, and a lot of the mechanisms in the brainstem in mice are quite similar to humans, in fact. So what they found is that when they give them an alarm, in this case, they'd give a shock to the foot. When you shock the foot of a mouse, it'll freeze or hold or breath hold or freeze, and there'll be a certain amount of time that it does that for. The mice, they managed to slow down their breathing, mimicking this breathwork meditation. Their breathing became slower. And when they shocked the feet of the mice who their breath had been slowed down, their alarm reaction was less. And the amount of time that they were in that alarm state was also less.
Wow, that's massive, isn't it, really?
So just by breathing slower, it changes how you perceive threat. So that's massive for anxiety.
Yeah, that's literally everything.
It is, and they're doing more and more experiments, and that especially in America, they're doing loads of experiments now, and they're doing some incredible work. And the amygdala plays a huge role in that, in how we drive to breathe. But generally, in terms of oxygen advantage, again, and I keep going back to oxygen advantage and atomic focus. Slower breathing increases focus. It increases our ability to focus on certain things, and people are generally not focused these days. Their heads are all over the place. More and more people are having brain fog and getting to places and not realizing how they've got there, and leaving the house and wondering whether they've locked the door, and their heads, they're constantly in their heads all the time. They can't get out of their heads, and sometimes the brain makes it feel quite real. So if you slow your breathing down, you come back to presence. You come back to reality, rather than living in that dream world which we spoke about the other day. So it's going to be, the Bolt score is important, and I spoke to you about the Bolt score the other day. Did you do a Bolt score? You did, didn't you?
We did. It was quite low. It was, I think it was low. It was like 16 seconds.
16 seconds, yeah, right. And you were both at that, weren't you? So, and 16 seconds is quite low as a Bolt score, but there's loads of factors into why that could be. Okay.
I was trying to be quite honest with it, like
always honest.
I was trying to be really honest. I didn't want to be one of these people who's like flipping dying and then saying, no, I'm fine.
That's pointless.
The moment I felt anything, and it was only very subtle, I just thought, I'm going to say that's it, And
that's how you should do your Bolt score. Always be honest, because you're only tricking yourself, and you want to know where your chemoreceptors are.
Yeah. So
if your Bolt score is 25 seconds and over, there's a good possibility that you're going to be less anxious. And I'm finding that is the case. I was speaking to a guy called Matt on the way over here, and his Bolt score was 4 seconds.
Wow, flipping heck.
Okay, very anxious person.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Constantly talking all day as part of his role. We spoke about talking and the problems with the gasp.
Constantly breath work, for your mouth.
His Bolt score today is 20 seconds. This is 4 weeks ago that he did an online session with me. His Bolt score now is 20 seconds. He feels different.
It's crazy. Yeah.
So, when I asked him, I said, do you feel any different? He said, well, I do. I'm going to leave you a voice note. So I know what's coming.
Yeah.
I'm sleeping a bit better. I'm taping up at night. I'm waking up with more energy in the morning. I know what's coming in that message, and that he feels less vulnerable.
Yeah. It's always the case.
And that's game changing, isn't it?
Of course it is. And I think it has never been more important to do this just purely from the point of view that we're more stressed than ever.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
and if we can control that, everyone's, as we said earlier, everyone's looking for ways out that are never going to come. Like, once I've stopped working, once I stop getting stress from other people, which is just never going to happen.
Yeah.
You have to almost look internally and think, again, the stress tolerance, how are you dealing with the stress? And if that's being impacted by your breathing, then the only way you're ever going to eliminate the stress, or at least control your reaction to the stress, is by focusing on things like your breath and focusing, I guess, on the overall well-being of your body, or massively your breath, because as you've said, it dictates your nervous system response on such a big level. Yeah.
Massive, yeah. So if you incorporate that with what you do, with movement, exercise, nutrition, and then you're breathing, you're regulating your breathing, you react to stress completely differently.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's all about the reaction. And to do that, your biochemistry has to be at a certain place.
Yeah.
And that's the importance of the oxygen advantage. And the Bolt score is that if your Bolt score is 25 seconds and above, you react differently. That's the idea, is that you potentially have a little bit more time before you're reacting.
And then you recover quicker too, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, because you're not necessarily holding on to things the same either. So
because that it is about the recovery as well, isn't it? Because
yeah,
it is like people who are highly anxious, who probably have a very low Bolt score, you could look at me if I'm highly anxious, that look could trigger me for the rest of the day if I haven't got this in check, if I'm not looking after my nervous response and my breath. Could go on all day, could go on tomorrow, go on for days.
Of course it can.
Really, you know. Whereas if I was looking after these aspects,
sure,
I might think, flipping heck, why is he giving me that look? But I can recover a lot quicker, and I won't let it ruin the rest of my day. You know.
Sure. So what it does is it allows you to be aware. It changes your awareness. It's a little bit like the chimp paradox, really. It allows you to notice what your brain is doing. That look wasn't a threat. Just have a bit of a check. That was just yourself a bit there, and just come back. And that can be for loads of reasons. And we get it wrong. I get it wrong every day. But you're constantly having to watch. But now that you're aware of it, you can work out far quicker what's threat and what isn't. And generally, frightened people frighten other people. So if you see somebody who's frightened, you said it before, oh, just by breathing like that, I can actually feel it. You actually physically moved your body. I can feel it. So if you see somebody who's anxious, you feel anxious. Because we're quite empathetic as humans.
Of course we are, yeah.
So you sometimes mirror them, you reflect them. So if you can be, I've noticed that I'm definitely more positive in negative situations, and it can sometimes just flip the situation on its head. You know, how amazing is that? So imagine if you go into a place and everybody's like that.
It'd be a totally different energy, wouldn't it?
It'd be a completely different energy. Imagine if you can go into a gym that had just that energy in there. Everybody was just moving in and out of everybody, and everybody understood everybody. Imagine what that would be like.
It'd be a wonderful world, but the gym's often a place where people go to try to release negative emotions.
They
you know, and don't get me wrong, it's quite a good way to. It's better than a lot of ways to do it, but it doesn't necessarily fix the problem, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I think because you're upregulated when you're in a gym, and this is what when I'm explaining this to PTs and PT instructors, before you get somebody to go into a gym and do some physical exercise, just make sure that they're not already upregulated before they start. Because a lot of the time when you go into a gym, you're already in upregulation. Oh, I've not been to the gym for ages. I look fat. Or
2 pre-workout scoops down.
A couple of them that will definitely help along the way. A bit of rage or whatever, you know, before you go in. You know, and then all that on top. So you're going into an environment. It's full of beautiful, fit, healthy people, and you feel that's going to change how the animal feels straight away. So if you can adjust the breathing before you even start and get the Bolt score up of that individual, they'll feel different in that environment.
Of course they will, yeah. Performance would be better as well, probably because your uptake of oxygen would be better.
Which is why
that's just potential thought. That.
Sure.
Yeah.
So which is why this is good for you, which is why the Oxygen Advantage is good for you in your job.
I might do it. You've got me intrigued now. Within about 2 hours, you've got me intrigued to learn more about Oxygen Advantage.
Sure. Well, I can talk to you about that.
Yeah.
I can coach you through that.
Definitely.
So I would say almost certainly that if you tested the Bolt score of each of your clients, it would give you an idea as to where they're at and their accountability also. Because if your Bolt score is lower, you're going to find that they're more likely to hit the fridge.
Yeah, they're more stressed and it's going to cause bad decisions. Yeah, true that.
They're far less likely to get to the gym. The Bolt score is higher. They're more focused because they're getting more oxygen.
It's an angle that people just don't look at as well. It adds a whole new dimension to.
It does.
Looking at someone's adherence, looking at someone's motivation and consistency with the program.
Absolutely, it does. And over the next 5 years, you'll see
more and more.
You'll see how the Oxygen Advantage is going to play a key role in that, and which is why I've followed it so much, is because I believe in it, because I know what it did with me, Dom. And you can't beat your own sort of guinea pig, can you?
No.
You know, and it worked for me. You know, after 40 years of having asthma, I don't use inhalers.
No.
That's life changing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Stop snoring. Stop getting up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night. Every now and again, I might get up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night, but I stopped doing that. I never wake up with a dry mouth. I can run hard up hills, breathing just through my nose. What's that all about? You know?
Yeah, if that ain't an advert for people to start doing this work, then I don't know what is, you know?
Sure. And I'm not fit, mate. I'm not by any stretch, you know, compared to what some of the things that people do. I'm relatively fit for 46 years old. I'm definitely fitter and healthier than I was when I was 26, you know? But it's been absolutely game changing. I don't feel the same when I go into environments. I used to feel quite anxious in certain environments. Everywhere I go now, I am always engaged with where my mind and my body is. Every environment I step into, I'm adjusting how I am in that environment, and I never had the ability to do that.
Fascinating, yeah, crazy.
You know, when I go into a hospital, I know there's triggers. I know that it smells. The smell of it is triggering. I know that the automatic doors and the general sound.
Awareness, really, isn't it? It's just a lot more heightened awareness, yeah?
Sure. So I adjust and I slow my breathing down in those situations when I know I'm going to be triggered, when I know the sort of triggers are around the corner potentially. When you go into certain environments where there's lots of alphas around, you know where you have to put yourself. It's almost a bit like Buddhism. Buddhism is like that. You know, adjusting yourself on a neuro-linguistic sort of perspective to how other people are and how other men and women are. So adjusting yourself to help them feel as if they fit in more.
They're more comfortable.
Sure.
Well, look, it's been an absolute blast.
It has.
We've gone on for a long time. We could go on for another few days here, really, but I think we'll leave it there.